Hello, everybody. You are listening to the Simple Electronics podcast. I am your host, Simple Electronics, and with me today I have a very special guest, Gadget Reboot. How are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm pretty good. I know you pretty well. We've been communicating for a little bit, but can you tell the listeners a little bit about you?
I run the Gadget Reboot YouTube channel. It's been live for just about 3 years now. And I cover the usual electronics hobbyist video topics like mailbags, Arduino, and sometimes more discrete electronic circuits or theory. And it's going okay, and I hope to expand it even further. And I hope YouTube doesn't keep changing its rules so that we can all keep doing videos for years to come.
Going okay is the understatement of the year. Your channel is on fire. I love your project videos. I love your circuit boards, and I love the little crazier things you do. The little bit more intense things you do, like the circle cutter, for example. Those are awesome videos.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I don't really have a plan in terms of both a release schedule. Like sometimes I go a couple of weeks without a video because I don't have any ideas. But sometimes I'll get a string of weird ideas and I'll do 3 videos in 1 week just to cover a bunch of topics on the whiteboard, and it can switch around. And so that circle cutter, a lot of these ideas are problems I need to solve. Like I bought a bunch of stickers with the channel logo, and the logo is a circle, but the cheaper stickers were square format. I would have to pay at least double to get a circle cut sticker. So I thought, I have an X-Acto blade and a couple of stepper motors, some scraps of wood. Let's see if I can make my own circle cutter.
And it ended up being probably my favorite video on your channel. It's just, I love the fact that you can just take a problem and attack it and make an interesting video out of it. It's a really cool concept.
Yeah, I also find it hard to strike a balance between getting the task done and trying to present it at least, if not educational, then entertaining, one or the other. You know, every viewer is going to be different, and some people don't want to hear about the software side. Some people say you should have covered the software more because I don't really understand. So I just guess I learned over time, do what works for me and hope somebody enjoys it.
Yeah, and it seems like from your comment section, at least people are enjoying it. But I think it's important for the listeners to understand that when someone like yourself creates something, they're actually creating kind of 3 things, if I'm not mistaken. So like that circle cutter, for example, you had to make the hardware part of it, you had to make the software part of it, and you had to make a video. So you were actually sort of a threefold maker in that sense, right?
Yeah, now video making, I've never really done anything like video editing before YouTube, and I did start out buying a camera, so it's a Canon 70D. I bought that within the first month or so because I figured, okay, I'd like to at least try to do things right. And my phone was already at the time getting old, and I still have it. I think it's 7 years old now, and it doesn't have enough memory anyway. So a lot of people use their phones, no problem. I couldn't, so I started out with a camera, learning from scratch, and I'm barely still trying to figure out how to get audio equalized and volume balanced, like my videos one to the next. I feel like I'm starting from scratch in some ways, but it seems to be holding up. And for software, I've never really done much of that. It was more like I had a course in school with it, and I did okay. Like it's been an aptitude, but not a career pursuit. So luckily, there's a lot of forums and other support mechanisms out there in the maker community. I just kind of copy and paste code and stitch it together, and I know how to add some extra glue in there, and so far so good. And the hardware stuff, I guess, has been my career and hobby interest since I can remember. So I've done circuit board design in my day job, so doing it now for project videos and having access to, a bunch of PCBs for $5 and, 10 or 15 years ago, I might have had to spend a couple of $100 for that. So the whole community and the evolution of technology just makes it all easier anyway. But Yeah, it works out well for me where sometimes a video has to get scrapped. Like I can't get the software figured out, or the hardware has become more involved than expected, and I might need to order stuff and take a month to receive it. And by then I forget what I was doing. But I try to make use of the things I have on hand and the capabilities I have to throw it all together and hope for the best.
Well, they're hell of they're hella capabilities. That's for sure. I think you do extremely well. But you kind of touched on a couple points here. Let's try to start at the top. So you said you use a Canon 70D.
Yes.
How was your learning process with that camera? Because DSLR is not exactly the easiest thing to just jump into sometimes.
Yeah, well, thanks to YouTube videos on the subject, that's how I really got started, where you look for a topic, a search topic like, okay, Canon 70D, YouTube settings or something, and there's going to be a whole bunch of videos. And so, I still don't know all the buzzwords like f-stop and the different kind of lenses. Mine came with a generic zoom lens, and so I don't swap lenses out, and having, I was having low light issues because at the Workbench I have an overhead light, of course, but everything can get really grainy still. I don't have extra proper camera lighting. And so just over time it evolved, and I still don't know what I'm doing with it. Like the frame rate, I think I set it at 24 or 25, whatever that level is. And the when you have certain displays in your videos, like an OLED, I'm not sure. I think I figured out how to change the settings to get that horizontal scrolling bar gone. I just have to play around with it. So it's just fumbling, but it was okay. It wasn't like a big disaster. Oh, what are all these buttons for? Just because of the YouTube videos, like just go into the menu, change this. And it got me up and running, and I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. You actually use sort of a low down angle on your camera instead of the overhead that myself and like people like Big Clive use. And I think that's really well suited to a DSLR because you can get that that shallow depth of field to put really what you're filming into focus, and the rest is kind of a little bit out of focus. And yeah, lighting is super important. Have you ever thought about using the high CRI LEDs like the LED strip to make yourself some additional lighting?
Well, I think in the future I do have a lot more plans to try different things out, and right now I just have this tiny setup in the corner of the basement, and I'm just working with what I've got. But I'm planning to move hopefully very soon, and when I get myself situated somewhere else and see what I have to work with, that's when I think I'm going to try, like again, it's probably going to be a research topic, and I'm going to have to see what I can get and what I can make work and try things out. And also for the camera angle, a lot of that is to do not with an artistic choice, but a limitation. I wish I could do overhead, maybe in addition to at least, not necessarily fully, but I don't have like an overhead camera mount. I never built anything. So it's really a tripod beside me, angling down as far as I can get it. And it's really like sometimes I have to cut out parts of a video and even refilm it because I bumped the camera and didn't realize. So it's always a fight for, like, you got to be right there in front of what you're working on, but so does the camera. And so we're side by side, like on an airplane.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, people will probably suggest to use a wide angle lens, but a wide angle lens only works if you have a gigantic workspace, because it just grabs everything off to the side, and whatever you're working on becomes, it doesn't become the main focus of the shot. People will look to the sides and see the clutter. I don't know about you, but I deal with a workbench that's relatively small, and everything to the left and to the right of the shot is just an absolute disaster.
Absolutely. Like I use my zooming to control that. So sometimes when I'm getting started on a topic at the beginning of the video, I will be zoomed out more, and you can maybe see the entire work mat and all the stuff laid out. But as I'm working specifically on a certain board or a certain part of soldering or something, I'll zoom right in, partly so I can see it better on the final video, and also to control the fact that in the past 10 minutes, I've got cut wire scraps everywhere. Something fell down and I don't have time to pick it up. And, that also gives it a bit of a rustic feel, but I kind of want to control it more. So yeah, I like the tighter camera view.
You also said that you used to make circuit boards for a living. Can you talk a little bit about your previous employment?
Sure. It's basically since I was at least 10 years old, this has been a hobby. And so I used to get those Radio Shack electronic kits where you have the little box of components and they have spring terminals and you clip in the wires following the booklet and make all kinds of sound effects or light flashers. And maybe by the time I was 13 or 14, I had a Radio Shack PCB making kit, which, came with the ferric chloride and an etch resist pen. And you draw out the traces on the board and try to etch it. So I had this little schematic. I think I got it from a book. It was just a NAND gate LED flasher. And I tried to draw that out on the PCB with the pen. And the traces were really thick and it looked horrible. It didn't make any sense. But I think it was going to be a working circuit. So I tried to etch it, and I think I etched most of the copper, including the traces, away. So that was a failure. But as the years went on, I realized I actually want to do this stuff for a living as well. So I ended up going to school and becoming an engineer. And within engineering, there's different career paths with design itself. So some companies have people that just work on schematics and then they have a PCB layout team, or they might even outsource it and not even do it on their own. And so it seems all the jobs I had, every designer covered the whole design, schematic and PCB layout and testing when it comes in as a prototype and start to finish, and helping design the architecture, the block diagram in the first place. What do we need on here? What features? And afterwards, if it goes to a customer, handling any support. So I've had to do the whole thing in pretty much every job for the past 20 years or so. It basically gave me a lot of opportunity to learn the whole design process. And that makes doing projects now, like on the hobby level, which are much smaller projects, so much easier. And I can just use free software like KiCad and whip up a design, and everything right now, like it's all just taking care of itself. I come up with an idea, and if I think I can make it work, it's just, okay, drag the traces around the screen and connect them up and send it off for an order. 5 days or less later, I have a circuit board in my hands. And that, like I say, 10 or 15 years ago, I may not even be able to do that. I'd be stuck with a breadboard. So it's good now, like I've had that design experience, and now I can really bring it to the hobby world and to YouTube.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't know you were a ring-carrying engineer.
Yes, I've had that degree since, I believe, the year 2000 I graduated. And I was a registered licensed professional engineer for many years as well, but I've decided not to continue with that. So I can't, in this province, in Ontario, I can't call myself an engineer anymore, but I'm an electronics designer.
Oh, interesting. So are you not originally from Ontario?
Yeah, it's basically, I've lived in and around, I lived in GTA, so around Toronto most of my life. And yeah, you have to be a paying licensed engineer in order to call yourself an engineer here. Otherwise, you could get into all kinds of legal trouble.
Oh, okay. You mean you're not part of the PEO, I guess, right?
Right.
Yeah, my wife is a civil engineer, so I know all about that. She's a ring-carrying member of the PEO as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but so can you tell me a little bit why you would go to let's say, a PCB way instead of etching your own boards with ferric chloride? I know that, they are only $5, but there's shipping on top of that. And there's something to be said about rapid prototyping too. Is that just not for you?
Well, I guess it depends on perspective. Like if I'm still talking about using ferric chloride and stuff like that, It may actually not be so rapid for me because, well, back when the last time I was doing that was probably the 90s, and it was like a fish tank aquarium with, the ferric chloride in there, and you have to handle the disposal of chemicals, and you also have to have supply of the chemicals, and especially times like this year, it might be difficult to get your hands on things, but you can always just order a board. And so I guess the shipping cost would be the biggest drawback for ordering the PCBs for $5 sort of approach. But I really think of that as my version of Rapid, because when I'm done the design, I export the Gerbers, I just email them out, and in a couple of days I get it. So as long as a project is worth doing, essentially if I'm going to do my own PCB, it's going to be worth the shipping. And if I really want the boards, I don't need them in a hurry, I can wait a month, I can always get the $7 non-courier shipping. And it works for me, and I kind of build it into the cost. Like, let's say it costs $25 shipping to get 5 boards at a $5 cost, so it's $1 a board. I can just amortize that $25 shipping and say it's, a couple of dollars a board, and I'm still good with that.
So I've been actually slowly gathering up what I need to etch my own circuit boards. Do you have any tips, something that you've, maybe some hard-earned ones that you've garnered over the years?
Oh, if you're going to try doing it yourself, yeah, I think there might be better methods now. I'm not sure if people do it with better chemicals or even CNC routing sort of approaches, but actually I'm probably so far out of that aspect where I don't even know anymore the best practices, because the last time I did it, it was so long ago that we printed out our circuit pattern on a dot matrix printer, and we had to print it at 2 times the size so that we could take a black marker and fill in the traces where the printer wouldn't have done a good job. And then we have to reduce it down to 1 times, and there's photography involved and negatives, and it's a laborious, tedious thing, and it's still prone to error. And especially if you're doing a 2-sided board, you have to line up the top and the bottom correctly. So we were only doing single-sided. And yeah, basically the only advice would be to use Google and YouTube as a resource to see if there's a better way, because it was very messy and it was time consuming, and lots of errors. You might have to redo the board, and it's something that if I were to do it, I'd be starting over as well, researching it.
I find it really interesting because the way you speak about the topic is a little bit like how I speak about being a mechanic these days. You're seeming to remember all the downsides of it because you have access to stuff like PCBWay, for example, and so you're remembering the difficult parts of it. And I'm just trying to look at it from a hobbyist perspective. It'd be just a really nice thing to have under my belt. But it's the same thing when people talk to me about cars. I can only remember kind of the negatives because I've done it so much, right? And it's been so long. So I find it really interesting, that sort of the way you speak about it. It's almost like the memories. They were like you hung on to the bad sides, the downsides of the process.
Yeah, for the PCB making, maybe it's because I didn't do it an awful lot, and so I remember it was such a struggle to get it right. And in the end, there were 2 PCBs I made that way, and I still have them. I actually did a video about those boards. Not anything to do with the manufacture of them, but just here's the circuits I first made PCBs with, and they still work, kind of thing. But yeah, because it's so long ago, it's like the good part is like, okay, good, it works. And now I have the board, so I can appreciate that. But I remember it was really tedious. And so now that I know there's much easier ways, I do kind of look at the original way I used as not so positive. But if it was only 5 years ago, I'd probably have better thoughts to add.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'm gonna do it just for like the sake of saying it's another skill. I don't think I'll be switching to that process for my everyday circuit board needs. That's for sure. But yeah, I've got basically I bought etch resist pen. I bought I have Sharpies on hand. I have single-sided copper clads. I just need to figure out now, like, sort of the storage, like how I'm going to store the ferric chloride. And I also want to try to make my own cupric oxide. I don't remember what there's another chemical which is made with peroxide, which is a little bit better. Apparently, it's safer and it's more etching. But yeah, I'm gonna go just for the fun of it. And I'll make some videos out of it, so it'll be fun.
Yeah, I would look forward to seeing those videos and learning some stuff myself. And yeah, the storage and handling of the ferric chloride, if I bring up another negative, I ruined one of my electronic books because I spilled it on there and it went through several pages soaking through, and it cut out part of a schematic on one of them. I don't know what the component value is. And so, yeah, you probably, if you're going to be getting into any of that for the first time, make sure you've got a good work area set up with lots of space and probably ventilation and a way to handle, like if you can store the stuff in plastic trays. I don't know, like over time for several days or so. Make sure everything is figured out in advance so you're not stuck with this batch of used chemicals and, oh, what do I do? And where can I take this?
Yeah, exactly. Shifting gears a little bit, I'm just taking a look at your channel here, and it seems like the first 3 videos in order of popularity on your channel have little to do with electronics. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about those 3 videos? And if you need a reminder, it's the NiCad drill battery video, the Christmas light bulb video, and the super glue and baking soda video.
Yeah, those were happy accidents. And again, it's just me filling a need as time goes on. So I believe the first of those videos was the drill battery. So I still have this Craftsman drill from, it's probably 15 years old at least. So it has 2 NiCad battery packs. And I don't use it too much. And I do have a newer drill with lithium ion and stuff like that I go to first. But one day I went to go use it. And of course I knew I'd have to charge the batteries. And one of them was fine. I could charge it. And the other one, I got the failure, like there's a defect light come on. And so it wouldn't charge. And I measured it. It's supposed to be 19.2 volts, I believe. And it was like 3.5 or 3. And so I assume it's not registering on the charger. So I did some research again, straight to Google. And I saw all kinds of techniques that people were using to basically boost the battery pack from another one or from some other source altogether, and sparks flying and everything. And just in messing around, I realized, because I'm playing around with this for days, I went to go, the charger was plugged into a power bar. And so I went to go plug in or turn on the power bar to get the charger ready. And I put in the battery pack again, and it started charging. And I thought, what's going on? And then in continuing to do research, I realized some other people have done this and covered this topic as well. And so I realized I stumbled on a technique that doesn't involve jump starting and doing all the risk. So basically the battery was able to charge fully, and eventually it discharged again and wouldn't recognize on the charger. So I covered it in a video the next time I needed to perform that little power on trick. And so I think it's just a 5-minute video, and I just did it for fun. And eventually it started getting some views, maybe not immediately. Like it could have gone, some videos that take off like that, they might go like 200 days or something with maybe a couple of hundred views only. And then it starts taking off. And that's what happened to that video. And similarly with the Christmas lights, again, it was, I believe, November one year, a couple of years ago. And I was trying to untangle my lights, and of course, most of the strings are dead, and I don't know which bulb it is. So I just did some research again, like how can you make this simpler? And of course, people say things like, well, if you have a dead string, go halfway down the string and just swap out the bulb for one that you think is good and see if it works or not, and just keep going halfway until you narrow it down. And then I realized, wait a minute, with this string of lights plugged in, one side of the string is going to be hot and one's going to be neutral up to the point where there's a break because there's a missing or a blown bulb, so the circuit's broken. It's still basically, it's like having a wire stuck in the outlet on the hot wire. And with one of those non-contact voltage testers, you should be able to just stick it on the wire and detect a presence of live AC. And so you should be able to go along the string of lights and figure out where the power disappears, and that's where you have a broken or missing bulb. So then again, I found out other people had covered that as well. It's another one of those things, I guess. 5 different places in the world, 5 people eventually at the same time will come up with the same idea. And so I kind of did a video on that and didn't expect anything of it. And it took off. Like every November, December, that starts getting views again. January, it goes back to barely anything. And the baking soda super glue video, I had this little plastic switch where one of the pieces on the plastic section of it, not the electrical micro switch part, but just part of the mechanism itself, I accidentally broke it because it was packed in a box and I just was bending everything around and it snapped. And of course, I taped it together and it wasn't working. I epoxied it. It wasn't, it was working for a while, but basically the epoxy slipped away. It wasn't bonding to the plastic of that switch. So I did some research and I've realized some people use super glue and baking soda to do things even like building up a little bit of a structure. Like some of those, I think I saw a video, those old CRT monitors for like maybe a Commodore 64, there is a pull down door on the front where you can access more controls, maybe brightness, contrast, and there may even be some audio video jacks. And so it's just a door with 2 plastic hinges, and somebody had a hinge broken and they used that method to build up this sort of plastic structure, and they could sand it into position, and they rebuilt their little door on their old CRT monitor. And I thought, let me try that with this little switch. So I turned on the camera and gave it a shot. It was ugly, but it didn't need to look presentable because it's just going to be hidden always inside the body of the switch. And it's still holding up today and working well. And again, that's one of the videos that for almost a year, it didn't get any attention, and suddenly I don't know what's happening. It's showing up in people's searches, and there's, on all these videos, of course, there's negative comments inevitably because most of the views come from people that aren't your core subscribers. But the people who do find it useful, they post comments, and that makes it worthwhile. Like, it's a couple of minutes video and doesn't take me too much effort to make, but it solves a lot of people's problems, and that's part of what keeps us interested as video makers.
And I think that's exactly what happened with my drill battery video, is that I bought a cheap drill from Banggood, and I bought a cheap battery from Amazon, and it made a decent combination together, but I didn't have a charger, right? So I took the opportunity to kind of explain what constant voltage, constant current charging does, like how it works, and then I used my power supply and I showed people that they could use a module. And I guess enough people have lost their chargers to make it worthwhile for them to watch this video. A lot of people are upset because they didn't want to learn how to do it. They just wanted to know how to do it. But yeah, it's pretty crazy how it takes off like that.
Yeah, it comes out of nowhere. Like, sometimes you can put effort into a video thinking, hey, I know people, like, I'm interested in this topic, I want to cover it, and I know other people definitely want to know about this, and really it doesn't go anywhere. People don't discover it somehow. Maybe the system doesn't promote it. Maybe it'll take off later, but then you just get surprised. Like, even like aside from those videos that did well for me that weren't necessarily the core content I normally do, there's some other videos that are core content and they don't do as well, like hundreds of thousands of views. They might get tens of thousands though. And I consider that a big success for my core videos. And you can't predict it, but when it happens and you see that it helps other people or just entertains them, it just helps keep you going. Because sometimes, you might go, a month doing videos and it starts to feel like a job and it feels like nobody's watching. I'm only getting a couple of hundred views even after a month. And then suddenly something happens, something takes off, you start getting some good comments and it picks you up again and keeps itself going, and you just got to stick with it. Like, I guess it helps to be doing it for a hobby and a passion, and ultimately you're going to do it anyway. And so you just have to ride out the low times.
Absolutely. And as a YouTuber, I'm sure that you understand, and I certainly understand that there are low points to doing YouTube. Like sometimes you feel like a project isn't working and you have to abandon all the time you spent in it. There's some times where you're really proud of something and, after 2 years it topped out at, about 600 views. Like it is what it is. Like it's fickle.
Yeah, I've had to abandon a lot of video ideas, and I try. If I'm lucky, I can get one video out a week. And I know a lot of people can get 2 or 3 videos out consistently per week, but they're also quicker videos maybe. Like if I do an average of 15-minute videos, others may get away with a 5-minute video so they can do 3 of those. But I kind of become my own enemy because a lot of people may just not even notice or care that there's a little mistake and I might want to go refilm something or spend more time trying to edit it properly, but other people wouldn't even notice if I just left it the way it was. So I think I take more time editing in the first place, and it just works out on average. I'm lucky if I get 1 video a week. And on top of that, if I'm most of the way through setting up a project for a video, and I've spent 3 or 4 days on it, and then I run into an obstacle, technically, whatever it may be, I need another part, or I just can't get something working, then that's when I start to get frustrated because now I got to start over and I feel like, oh, I'm late. Not that I have a schedule, but I can't just fall behind just because I may disappoint viewers expecting a video. If I may have posted, on my blog of the YouTube channel, that section where you can post little pictures of stuff. Hey, I'm doing this video. It's going to be out in a couple of days. And then 3 days later, you have to abandon it. You don't want to disappoint people, but you can only do so much. And it does take a lot of time. And so, yeah, like I wish I could get to a point where I could buffer up 3 or 4 projects, not necessarily have the videos all ready to go, but just know the project is a success and then I can just film it successfully later. But I just keep getting tripped up. Maybe I'm challenging myself too much sometimes and I'm doing things that are more complicated than I'm ready for. But again, that's what keeps me going at the same time. I don't want to just crank out stuff just for the sake of a video. So it's a constant balancing act. And I think, again, right now in the middle of real estate, a lot of my stuff is in storage, not even in my house. And once I'm ready to get set up in a new work environment at home, it's going to take some time again to ramp up into that. And I hope whenever I get settled, I can I'll have all my stuff, my test equipment, my components all ready to go, and I'm not going to be mentally distracted. And I hope I can just get to that point where I can have regular videos again and just be able to move through them a lot smoother. Right now, there's a lot of distractions. I'm trying to keep up. I've been falling behind. I'm like, maybe now I'm lucky if I get a video every 2 weeks, but people still come back and view. So I appreciate that and the support. And I just need to keep going another couple of months and hope everything just goes really smoothly from there.
So for those viewers who are a little bit confused, Gadget Reboot is completely packing everything up and moving. He's trying to sell his home right now, right?
Yeah.
And do you know what you're looking for a new place? Are you trying to move sort of out of the city? Or are you trying to build a tiny home? Like what the future holds?
Yeah, I know generally what I'm trying to ultimately transition into. And this is something I've been really looking toward for the past couple of years, where I'm in a subdivision area around Toronto, and I've wanted to go a little more remote, not too remote. I need internet access and running water in and out of the property, but I would like more space, more land. in my younger days, I had access to that. And so as time goes on, I had to be closer to where I worked. And so I ended up, I used to live in an apartment many years ago. And then I kind of was in a basement apartment of a house. And then now I have my own house. But I'd like to go back to spreading out a bit more, having space around me and maybe even some outbuildings so I can have a work area for woodworking stuff as well as electronic stuff and not have to worry whenever I cut some boards, oh, and now I got to get the wood chips out of the oscilloscope. And I want to do something like that. And it's going to be a bit of a transition. I'm not going to immediately, I don't think I'll be able to go immediately from selling here. I'm going to have to maybe temporarily live somewhere short term and rent or something like that. But that is the goal, to get more space and a little more freedom and maybe become more self-reliant in terms of maybe go toward self-employed, because if I'm going to live further from the city, maybe I can work from home, as many people are starting to do this year. And that may lead into more sort of a contracting work philosophy instead of I've usually been full-time salary on site, 40 hours a week. And so maybe if I start working remotely, I can be self-employed and take 6-month contracts here and there and maybe have more freedom that way as well and not get stuck in a rut for 5 years. And so a lot of changes coming and I just need to get to it.
So if there's any major corporations listening to the podcast here, clearly Gadget Reboot is available if you want to send them a contract offer. And don't forget, the podcast gets 5%. Just kidding. Just kidding, obviously. Are we going to see something like Julian's Shenanigans on your channel? Are you gonna bring us along for the process of putting together your new workspace?
Yeah, definitely. There will be some footage of what's going on, which of course I have no idea the scale yet. Like I may just end up for the next couple of years working again out of the corner of a basement, but obviously I will be filming something to do with moving in, getting the space set up and configured, and probably even soliciting ideas like, hey, should I use this corner or that corner of the basement or the room or whatever? And how would you guys set this up? Should I have a longer work table or 2 smaller ones on different walls? Like what has anyone done that's worked for them or against them? Because I'm not much of an interior designer, and I'd probably go all in and set something up and then at the end realize, you know what, I should have abandoned this halfway. If only I asked for advice. And especially if I have bigger space, like extra outbuildings, there's definitely going to be projects like I might do something solar and power something, even if it's an exhaust fan for a shed. If I'm going to work inside a little building and I want to exhaust air out in the summer, who knows, I might have a project. And there may be like, if let's say there's enough land and I want to do some sort of small gardening area, grow some food, I might set up some sort of again, something solar related, something Wi-Fi related where there's an automatic watering system or something. I was going to be doing something like that here anyway. I think 2 years ago I started investigating that, but then I started leaning toward, I might be moving from here any month now, so maybe I should postpone that. So definitely projects relating to new workspace and living space and maybe some home automation stuff. There's a lot of things on the whiteboard and there's lots of content to come for the next several years at least.
Is that how you organize your ideas? You use a whiteboard?
Sometimes, yeah, because if not, what I started doing originally was just an idea comes to my head and I try to crank out the video, and then more ideas kept coming and I couldn't keep track, so I'd try to write it on scraps of paper, which disappear. And I've never really been good at keeping like text files where, okay, it's written in the computer or a phone and it should be readily available, but I just don't seem to respect it enough. Like I might make a file and then 6 months later I realize, oh yeah, I did that 3 months ago, delete. It wasn't really useful to me. So having a whiteboard and it's right there in front of me every day and I can look at it when I'm passing by and add thoughts to it, that's been working the best for me. The only problem is I've been using whiteboards as sticky notes. When a whiteboard is full, I forget you can actually erase them. I keep buying whiteboards and I have a collection. So they're all full and they're all packed away. So I'll get to rediscover my ideas when I eventually unpack those.
Oh boy. Yeah, I have a Google Doc with, actually it's a sheet with all my ideas, but the problem is I don't go access it. You have to purposely go into your drive and access the sheet. So when I'm sitting here watching a Gadget Reboot video, for example, I'm not actively being told by my workspace that it's time to go do a project. I have to literally go into the sheet, and it doesn't work for me. So I am looking to add a whiteboard to my space, but I don't have any available wall at the moment. I have to move things around. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I have a Google Doc as well with ideas and copies of links to forums, like a specific page. Let's say there's a 30-page forum thread on something, and I found it on a Google search. And hey, I might like to cover that transistor topic in the future or something. And that Google Doc is about 35 pages long right now. And all I've ever done is add to it. I've barely read from it.
Yeah, I guess that's a little bit of a hobbyist mentality, right? We're kind of we're more in the business of taking things in than moving things out, right? It's even if you complete a project, it's never really complete. It's always well, what's revision 2 going to look like? At least in my case. I don't know if it's like that for you as well.
Well, definitely there's a lot more information coming in than I can ever complete. And it's never ending, which is good because then I get to choose from 10 or 20 perspectives on a single idea and try to get something done. But yeah, even the circle cutter stepper motor machine, that, I built that for a specific purpose of cutting 100 circles. That's how many stickers I ordered. And maybe if I ordered another batch, I would fire it up again. But even when it was all done and it was set up, it was working, it was tweaked, I still was working on the code, even though I didn't need to. It works. It does what it's supposed to. I wanted to change the user interface with the rotary encoder to select menu options on the OLED. And I wanted to add extra alerts and maybe so I can trigger it instead of me pressing a button to say go. Maybe hook it up to another circuit so that it can trigger it. It can auto-detect when I place a sticker on the platform and it can automatically go. Of course, with detecting that nobody's hand is in the way of the blade and having shielding there. And why am I still developing this? I should be putting my effort into a different project that I can probably make equally as well. And there's no use in putting my thoughts and energy into this particular one. But you know what? It's also never wasted time because you're thinking and coming up with ideas. And if you're researching it, you're stumbling on other things. And it's always useful, I find. I don't regret having maybe spent an extra 20 hours on something that was done 2 weeks ago and never needed to be looked at again. It's always a good process to go and work on something.
Yeah, absolutely. I was about to say, watch your fingers with the automation thing.
Yes.
I've had a fantasy since I was a kid that I wanted to build an exoskeleton. I think it's from watching. I don't know if you've ever seen Reboot.
No.
No, apparently it's a Canadian animated series because my American friends have no idea about it. But it's basically one of the first CGI based sort of TV series. But anyways, they live in a computer basically. Huh. And there's a scene where there's an exoskeleton, sort of like the power loader from, what is it, Aliens?
Okay.
And since then I've been fantasizing building one, but it's just so scary to have something hydraulic or electrically driven joints that you attach your soft human joints to, right? If it goes over limit, you're done.
Yeah, high voltage scares me. And basically, actually, I think I once gave myself a mild shock from a transformer plugged into the wall that I think it was only putting out 50 volts AC. And I think I was 12 years old. I was hooking up something to it and I was holding the wires while it was live. And I felt the little buzz there. And anytime I'm dealing with just regular 120 volt AC, I have a multimeter or something probing around that side of a circuit. I almost want to wear gloves and then put electrical tape around the probes, even though I know they're perfectly insulated. And anything mechanical like that can attack me, I'm deathly afraid of.
Oh yeah, definitely. I have gotten shocked by 110 volts before. It's interesting to say the least. I was a kid. My dad was working on outlets, and one was sticking out of the wall, and I just grabbed it to push it back into the wall, and yeah, it's quite the buzz it gives you.
Come to think of it, that reminds me, I electrocuted myself with a camera, an old school camera in the mid 80s. I had it apart, and it had one of those powerful capacitors in there, and it was charged up for the flash circuit. It was laying on the table, and I put my hand on it, and immediately my hand shot straight up in the air. That was fun.
That's awesome. I mean, it's one of those things you wouldn't do by purpose, but it's pretty interesting to think about it once it's happened.
Yeah, and the fact that you survived it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that have questionable survivability that people survive through, which is pretty crazy to think about.
Yeah, I think I've electrocuted myself with 120 volt AC as well. It was actually in an apartment that I was renting long ago, and there was an electrician in because one of the hallway light fixtures started smoking. It was an older building, and the wiring was kind of literally disintegrating, and so it was shorting out in the wall. And the electrician was up there. He had this the light fixture down, and the wires were hanging. He had to go back to his truck to get a replacement fixture. And I was just, curious. And so I just started moving a wire out of the way so I could see something else. And I was touching the insulation, but I felt a tingle. It's like, okay, I'm afraid.
Yeah, maybe the insulation was broken. Who knows?
I think it was just, it was even moist, whatever it was. I don't know. It was the summer. I don't know if there's humidity, but it was a combination of, it was melting, like kind of like you touch the solid insulation, but you're pushing it, you're squishing it. And so I think it was turning liquid, and it was conductive or something. And so it was horrible.
I've had to work on hybrid vehicle batteries in my profession, and that's a little bit scary when you have 400 volts DC just at your fingertips. That's pretty nuts. So yeah, 110 volts still scares me though.
Yeah, it is scary stuff. Like, imagine if we lived where there's 220 or 240 in the wall.
Yeah, no thanks. No thanks. I think I'll just keep watching Big Clive and be happy that I'm not putting forks in my food.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll just cook stuff in the microwave or something.
I have a microwave transformer actually that I saved from a scrap microwave, but I'm just too terrified to hook it up to anything.
Years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I threw out a microwave that had some problems, and I should have kept the transformer. But what I do have is, I think it's a 20,000 volt, I'm not sure, neon sign transformer that I got maybe 20 years ago or so, and it was on eBay. And it had a good price. It was used, ripped out of something, and it was like, considering that thing is really heavy, it was reasonable shipping. So I bought it, and I actually used it to make a Jacob's ladder, which is where you have high voltage on two terminals. And in my case, I just took the ground 14 gauge, I believe it is, copper wiring out of some leftover household wiring. And so you make a couple of rigid copper terminals that are narrow at the bottom, I think maybe around a centimeter spaced apart, and then you gradually let them get wider. And when you fire up the transformer, an arc will form across the bottom where the gap is smallest, and then it, with all the science behind it, ionizing the air and heat being involved, possibly it helps carry the flame. It's basically a flame. It's an arc of electricity and a flame, and it just rises up. It's like from the old horror movies, black and white movies. And so I did this, and it worked. It just kept doing this little rising arc, and when it gets to the top, it can't jump the gap anymore because it's constantly getting wider, and so it extinguishes, but then it's ready to start at the bottom again where you have the path of least resistance. And what I was able to do was take a candle wick and put it halfway up this ladder, and when the spark would rise, it might do a couple of puffs of smoke, but then maybe the fourth time, I had a lit candle, and that scared me as well, but it was fun.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I've been thinking of just showing how to drive a transformer in general, I was probably going to use something like 2 volts in and pull it high and low, like a sort of like a push pull type thing, and see if we can get any sort of voltage multiplication through it, just as a demo. But just in case, maybe I won't mess with it just yet.
Yeah, that actually sounds similar to, I used to have this helium neon laser power supply. So that would be similar to a neon light. It's a laser tube I had where there's an electrode on each edge of it, and the tube itself might have been 6 inches long. So it takes, I think the power supply was able to give it 3,000 volts, but at a low current, several milliamps maybe. And it's like a neon light essentially, and there's a mirror on each edge of the tube. So one's fully reflective and the other is partially reflective. And so with the tube itself, when you power it, it lights up like a neon red tube, and some light is going to be bouncing on the fully reflective mirror, and then it goes forward toward the other end of the tube, and when it goes back and forth and builds up to a certain point, the light can break through the partially reflective mirror, and that's your laser beam that comes out. And I believe it used a 555 square wave generator and pulsed some transistors into a transformer, and then it had a capacitor diode voltage multiplier and built up a couple of thousand volts. And that was a kit from a 1989, I believe, Radio Electronics magazine article. And I think the kit was being sold from New York, because I saw this article recently when I was going through things, packing things for the move. And I remember ordering it back then, and I put it together, and it wasn't the easiest project for a beginner, but it worked, and that shocked me as well, and it shocked someone else who was handling it. They actually touched the high voltage side momentarily and dropped it, and I thought, oh boy, yeah, I gotta either insulate that better or just not let anyone touch it. And you know what? I recently, within the past couple of years, I located that old piece of hardware in the basement. I had no idea if it worked, and I wanted to hook it up, and it shocked me again. And it shocked me from a part that you're not supposed to get shocked. It's supposed to be the ground metal chassis. But I think what I discovered, it's the same as the electrical wiring in that old building. The wiring on this had disintegrated, and plus the way it was bolted in, the wire was kind of pinched with tie wraps to the chassis, and the insulation, I think, has become compromised, and now it's making the chassis live. So I still have it. Maybe I'll investigate it. I think I blew something because I heard a little crackle, so I'd have to look into it, but I wonder if I can get that laser up and running.
The crackle was probably just the shock jumping across your teeth. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, probably. I'll have the dentist look at it.
We have a demo unit at the college where I teach to show ignition systems. So we have 6 spark plugs that are live. They fire. And I was showing the students that you can actually pull one of the spark plug wires off of the spark plugs and then see how the engine reacts to see if that cylinder is actually helping the engine or not. And when I pulled it up, it turns out I was leaning on the metal bench that it was sitting on, and I got zapped to 30,000 volts.
Wonderful.
That was a good one. Yeah, that's incredible. The feeling you get in your arm when you get hit by 30,000 volts.
Oh yeah, like I can't imagine that after that camera circuit threw my arm in the air. Like, yeah, I think I'm just gonna try to stay away from anything that I know to be dangerous like that. I'm going to stick with 24 volts or less.
I have to be honest, when I watch electro boom videos, I recoil because I know that an explosion or a shock is coming.
Yeah.
So I'm like watching between my closed hands over my eyes type thing.
Yeah, and sometimes I find myself trying to anticipate when it's going to happen, and it didn't happen there when he connected something. But then, I just get into listening to him explain something, and then suddenly you hear a snap, and he throws something across the table, and he falls off his chair, and it catches me off guard.
Who would you say, I know these days you don't have much time, but who would you say you watch on YouTube the most? And you don't have to mention me whether it's true or not.
It is kind of hard to think, like this year being so busy with everything. I find mostly what I'm doing is researching things like real estate market, and mostly when I watch electronic content, it's what YouTube is recommending to me, which I'm actually seeing like a lot of things I never heard of before. A lot of small channels are showing up. And otherwise, though, like a couple of years ago, I got started mostly with, I think everyone gets started watching Julian Eilert and mailbag videos. And that's probably what inspired me to do a mailbag in the first place. And then, of course, everyone stumbles on EEV blog. And I think back as far as 2016, I think just from Googling things like op-amp related information, I think I stumbled on EEV blog back then. And nowadays with a lot of the smaller channels, really the first name that comes to mind is Pile of Stuff. Let's be honest. I mean, and he keeps a regular schedule, so it's easy. Like, you know what? About a year ago, I think I had been watching his videos for a year at that time. And I realized one day I'm automatically checking around, say, midnight when a Mailbag Monday is about to come out and a Friday video. And I realized he keeps to a schedule. And like I noticed I was getting in sync with that schedule. And, you know, I should be taking that advice, being aware of that. And I can't stick to a schedule, but, you know, I can't force something that's not going to work for me yet. But yeah, Pile of Stuff is probably the one channel out of current times that I would say for sure I do keep an eye on regularly. And of course, I watch your stuff and Another Maker a lot and learn things. And, you know, with Another Maker, all of the Node-RED sort of stuff I've been introduced to and I still need to play around with. And it's like a whole new world that I'm about to get into. And he knows more about the software side of things. And so I plan to learn a lot from his videos coming up as well. And yeah, basically, it's just YouTube really recommending to me these days. And it's hard to think because I haven't really had the time to sit down and watch out of deliberate intent.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, these days I'm always at my computer, so I'm taking a little bit more. I watch a little bit more YouTube. But yeah, I have YouTube as background noise at this point. So I typically have sort of like people doing let's plays of video games in the background while I work, and then when I take breaks, well, I also listen to a lot of podcasts, so there's that too. But then when I take breaks, it's going to be like something from Pile of Stuff or from you or from Another Maker, or from the bigger ones like I like Clive's stuff. Although sometimes Big Clive is becoming a little bit repetitive, and I know I don't want to stomp on the toes of electronics Jesus there, but some of his stuff is like, you know, consumer products are kind of the same on the inside. Like there's nothing too interesting. Like, you know, they cut corners in the separation of the PCB, and you know they're using a capacitive dropper, and you know, so some of the stuff is a little bit less interesting, but I find his stuff mostly entertaining. Like most of everything is entertaining.
Yeah, channels like Big Clive and even AVE, if we deviate slightly from core electronics, you know, these are things I do watch, but I've never watched them regularly because, yeah, like teardowns and things like that, it's not really my thing. So I might watch some out of curiosity and some out of entertainment. And especially if it looks like a certain specific video has something like, okay, let's electrocute ourselves and see how much pain we can tolerate and crank up the voltage or something. You know, if there's a weird offbeat topic, I'll definitely tune in. But really, I tend to go more for the educational stuff. And there's only so much I can get from watching this being torn down and that being investigated. You know, maybe repairs would be more interesting if somebody's going to tear something down, and if they can either fix it or diagnose it to the point where it's not fixable. Like, there's still educational value. That's what I'm more inspired by.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like both sides of it. So I like the entertainment on some days and the education on others. And in fact, some days I'm just even avoiding the education because my brain is so overloaded from building courses for my college and stuff like that. So sometimes just the entertainment part is the good part too.
Yeah, definitely. I also use YouTube for background environment throughout the day. And like I used to more so in the past, before, let's say, July this year, I used to use YouTube for listening to music where there might be a channel that has a 2 or 3 hour compilation video, and you just leave the one video running, and it's all going to be the same kind of music. But in July, when they changed their advertising and started highly encouraging mid-roll ads, like you're listening to something in the background, whether it's music or just some other topic, like for 30 minutes, or a podcast for 3 hours, Joe Rogan, and suddenly you're listening to something like an iPhone ringing, and it's the beginning of an ad. And what? And then you got to go and skip it, or depending how invested my intention is to the process of watching it, like I might get really irritated and I try to quit out of the video and go back in, and sometimes it'll let me pick up with no ad. Sometimes it'll start me at the beginning, and I got to make a decision. Okay, do I really want to scroll back and find my place, or do I want to tolerate the ad? And I'm finding my user experience is being ruined. So if anyone has ever seen a mid-roll ad on my videos, let me know, because I try to force that off. Only I do the pre-roll and maybe the ads after a video, but I don't want to ruin the viewer experience for anyone who does want to tune into any of my videos. I don't wish mid-roll ads on anyone. So I try to use YouTube, like it's on every day, but I may only be using it for the background, but the ads make it difficult.
I totally agree about mid-rolls. I think there's only 2 or 3 videos on my whole channel that have mid-rolls. And simply it's because they're the ones that are getting pushed to a more general audience. And if I'm going to take their abuse in the comments, they're going to take my abuse in the mid-rolls.
Yeah, I should do that too. I think I have one video. I think my total is, I don't know if I have around 250 videos. One of them, I think, has one mid-roll. And I should probably go look at the drill and Christmas light and baking soda video and maybe throw in one mid-roll.
I think they're too short. I think they have to be... Yeah, they have to be over 8 minutes now.
Yeah, it used to be 10. Now it's 8. Okay, yeah. So the one video I have it on, I think, is over 20 minutes.
Yeah, which, I mean, to be fair, it makes sense having one mid-roll ad, but I personally don't like it. I don't begrudge anybody who puts ads in their videos, because let's be honest, until you become a giant YouTuber, there's no way you're making back the money you've even spent on the parts for these projects. So it just is what it is, but it's just not for me.
Yeah, I guess it's all context as well in how they do it. Like, I believe when this change came into effect in July, if a content creator did not take any action, YouTube was going to automatically enable and decide where the mid-rolls will go. And I think with those videos, like the music couple of hour long videos that were probably made 2 years ago or older, the content creator probably isn't even paying attention. And so what happens, I think, where it gets annoying is where you're in the middle of listening to a sentence or in the middle of a song, and then the ad pops in. But if the creator has a role in it, they can at least put it somewhere intelligent and it makes more sense. So I think it's too new. Like, it really just started in July, coming all out of nowhere. And so both we need to get used to accepting it's a new part of the experience, and the creators need to realize this has happened on their videos if they don't know, and go and tweak it.
I think Dave Jones of the EV blog was saying that the wording of the email they sent sort of sounded as if you decide to manually place your ads, you might get lower value ads.
Yeah, who knows, really? Like, even if that was the way it was at a certain time, they could change their policy again, and they don't really tell us for sure everything that they're doing and when they change it. So yeah, I think the understanding in general is that it happened because maybe advertisers are pushing for more ad content and revenue. And so YouTube is doing, maybe this is like a first draft. They're over pushing it or something, trying to figure out what works. Like, who knows? Maybe they have data by now that says this isn't working because people are annoyed and they stop watching. Or maybe they know people are annoyed because of the activity. They see people skipping or canceling out, but it's still working enough to get revenue, so they'll keep it. And we just have to see what shakes out. And it's probably a transition right now still.
Yeah, and YouTube is constantly changing stuff.
Yes.
Is there anything missing in your lab, like equipment-wise? Is there anything that you're pining for? Maybe this new space will allow you to have?
It would be probably nice to have maybe a better oscilloscope at this point, like more bandwidth. I have a 100 megahertz, which I think the effective bandwidth would be 20 megahertz, because above that, you might get attenuation on your signal. So you're not really seeing the true amplitude of, let's say you have a sine wave or a square wave on there and it's too high of a frequency the scope can't handle. Like I'd like maybe a 200 megahertz scope or something like that, because I think one of my older interests was FPGAs, so field programmable gate arrays, or basically it's similar to a programmable chip in that it's not software though. You're actually configuring hardware that's built in. You're essentially writing a script that controls the wiring of existing gates and lookup tables and things. It's all just wiring up the hardware to make a circuit. And a lot of those can have like a 50 megahertz oscillator running it. And on my scope, I don't know if I could accurately see that sort of a clock signal. Like if I'm going to generate some output signals around 50 megahertz or a little less, I would like to know that I have the equipment that can properly represent that. And I do have a nice signal generator I bought myself 2 years ago. So, up till then, if I needed some clock pulses, I might take a 555, but you can only do so much. You might get into a situation where you need more control over those pulses, or it just can't drive the other circuit. But you get a proper, nice, fancy signal generator, and it's like a magic box. You hook it up to almost anything, and it's still going to maintain its integrity, its amplitude. It's not going to get disrupted by your circuit, and it just keeps putting out the signal you want on tap. So I've got that, but I'd like a better scope and power supplies. I used to have a proper bench power supply that can do like up to, it had 2 power supplies on it, and each one could go 0 to 30 volts and 0 to 3 amps. And you could cascade them to get 0 to 60 volts, or you could have the 230 volts in parallel and double the current to 6 amps. That was great for all kinds of things, anything that needs a little bit of current, or if you're doing something with motors and you need 24 volts or so. But it's old, and it kind of like goes into a relay clicking. It's like a click of death for a power supply. Like it's the displays are all over the place for the voltage and current, and you put a meter on there to see what's really going on. It's going like 0 volts, 10 volts, 3 volts. It's what? Stabilize, come on. So I'd like a better robust power supply. Right now I'm using one of those little buck boost things, and that's fine for breadboard basic circuits, but I would like some core proper test equipment like that.
Yeah. Would you be interested in things like 3D printers or laser cutters, or that's really not in your domain?
Well, I would definitely like a 3D printer someday, but I've not yet had such a need that has inspired me to go get one. But though sometimes I wish I could just go and download a file for a certain little custom box or something, like a mount to hold something, even a camera, like an attachment so I can dock a camera into a 3D printed little console and have it bolted to something else. And, otherwise I'm going to have to go find scraps of wood and tack it together and hope it holds. But it's more of a side thing. Like if somebody were to want to sponsor me and send me a 3D printer, I would love to review it and use that as a tool going forward. But it will be probably in the further future, and anything like CNC machines and laser cutters, it's a little further away. Like maybe if I had a bigger workspace and I could dedicate some space and resource to that, but I don't have an immediate need either way.
Hint, hint, Creality, if you're looking for someone to review the Ender 3 V2, send one to Gadget Reboot. Actually, in fact, to confirm the fact that it's not a cherry-picked model that you sent specifically to him because you knew it was problem-free, you should send another one to me. Our P.O. boxes are listed somewhere on our channel.
Absolutely.
Just in case somebody at Creality is listening.
Yeah, it's that would be amazing.
And hey, if you're another company that's upset that we didn't mention you can show Creality who's the boss by sending us your 3D printer.
Yeah, we can do a shootout, no problem. A collaborative video shootout. You can send one model to Gadget Reboot, one to Simple Electronics, and we can do a comparison video and the pros and cons that we see in each model and promote everyone equally.
I think if anyone's really wanting to see this content, they should send this portion of the podcast over to some 3D printing companies. That would be the thing to do. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
So just towards the end of the podcast now, I have a question that I ask every single person I have on, and I think you've listened to the podcast, so I think you know what's coming. But I want to set it up for the viewers as well, if that's all right.
Sure.
So my question is: the setup is that you have, let's say, a large government agency that gives you a large sum of money. They support you to make your own business. It could be anything you want, but it has to be a business. Profitability is not important. What sort of business would you start?
Well, that's an interesting question. And I think, given my work history experience with designing basically consumer products, and how I find that can get a little old after a couple of years, I don't think I'd go that route myself with trying to design a product or a bunch of products, but maybe services, like, for example, like something obscure. It's not going to be something that necessarily makes any sense, but a nice ideal thought would be, well, for example, in the maker community and people coming to watch YouTube videos to learn something, one thing from the comments section that shows up a lot, somebody might say, oh, I wish you had elaborated, or could you do a follow-up video on more about this aspect, the hardware or the software or the concept? And otherwise, people might say, I tried to replicate this. I built it the same way. I double-checked everything. I don't have any short circuits. I've uploaded the code. I didn't get errors. I just don't know what I did wrong. I can't get it working. I think it would be an interesting service to have available, and maybe it could be in different formats, like actual physical brick and mortar location, or maybe just like sort of a video connection online, like a Skype or something, where somebody can get in touch with someone who has more experience maybe. And I guess maybe we'd be thinking about the hobbyist level, but even maybe a little more advanced, even small startups, where they just have some obstacles. And if there's a service that has experienced people on hand, they can show, like, either remotely or bring it into a location. Here's my setup. What am I doing wrong? And it's probably going to be something simple, like somebody can immediately recognize, oh, you forgot this or didn't do that, or you should be using a different part or something. Another thing would be like access to equipment for debugging and or testing, even if you don't have a problem to solve, but you have testing to do. Even as a small startup, let's say somebody's doing wireless stuff, and so they have RF things, they designed a module, and the antenna needs to be tuned for, like, there's an onboard little chip antenna, like all of our little Wi-Fi modules. But when you design a circuit board, you design it with the ideal trace widths and spacings for the correct radio frequency response, but you still need to tweak it with inductors, capacitors for a little tuning circuit. And that's done with, sometimes the test equipment can be like $30,000 for an RF transmitter to simulate your signals going out. And again, another $20,000, $30,000 for a receiver that can take your signals in and show you the strength of them. And there's another piece of equipment, a vector network analyzer. And what that can do, you can plug your circuit board's antenna output without your antenna on the board. Instead, you connect it up to this network analyzer, and it can see your RF signal, and it can show you if you're tuned well or if you're losing your signal. You need to tweak your component values until you've got a matched circuit and a good performance. And now you know you're going to have a guaranteed best RF performance you can get. Not everyone has $20,000 or $30,000 times 2 or 3 pieces of test equipment, and they would like to have their circuit tuned. So, it doesn't mean a company like we are talking about buys this equipment and you have to maintain it like every year. It has to be calibrated. But, you can rent it. It might cost you $1,000 or $1,200 a month per unit. And if you have a facility available where people can come in and whether it's they pay a little bit for a service, they can do the testing and they pay a couple of hundred instead of having to rent it for a couple of thousand or own it for a couple of tens of thousands. And just things like this, it's sort of like having your 3D printer available in the public library, a little more advanced though, so you can get troubleshooting skills available to you and testing facilities available to you as a hobbyist instead of a big business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's actually really close to what I would do. And what I would do would be basically a makerspace that would have what you're talking about, but at a more basic level. Right. That's all. Like when you talk about RF and whatever, that's like that's over my head. And in fact, if it's RF, it's through my head.
Yes.
If we're being honest. But yeah, I would do the very similar thing. I would have a location where I'd have a bunch of tools, 3D printers, CNC cutters, probably like a manual lathe and a manual mill, all sorts of cool test equipment and tools, and people would be able to come in and play around with the tools and make something. And then when, after hours, they're all my tools. I get to make videos on them and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's the ideal, like to have a technical playground with everything you think you would ever want at your disposal, and to be able to help people at the same time and make things more achievable instead of just a dream that may never come true. You can just book your time and go in and use the stuff and maybe learn some new things you never thought of. And yeah, it's like another version of Googling or watching on YouTube. You can meet other people and share ideas, maybe come up with your own new company. Who knows?
Yep. And that's exactly, I guess the point of this question is to see what you'd be doing if money wasn't an issue, I guess,
Yeah, I guess pursuing my own hobby and helping others get their hobby going as well.
It seems to be a common theme among the people that I've been interviewing that helping others is high on the list. And I guess people like us wouldn't be spending hundreds of hours a year, thousands of hours a year, maybe, making YouTube videos if we didn't care about other people, right?
Yeah, and I think part of it for us creators is having gone through our stages to get to where we are. We know that we know the value of having help available and the kind of help we've already gotten ourselves. It becomes a natural built-in thing. It's a part of the process to be in the hobby and to even do YouTube. It's part of how we got there. It's part of the equation. And so we automatically want to do it, and we appreciate the value of it. We know people are going to appreciate it, and it makes it all worthwhile, and it just all makes sense. It's not like a conscious choice. I feel like doing essentially volunteer work and helping a bunch of people. It's just a part of the whole thing.
Yeah, it just is what it is.
Yeah.
So if people want to find you, where's the best place to find you? I guess that would be your YouTube channel, maybe?
Yes, I believe you can get there with youtube.com/Gadget Reboot.
And that's, if you're watching on YouTube, it's actually on the screen right now. But also, since I don't think you're going to do it, I'm going to do it for you. Gadget Reboot also has a Patreon page, which the link is on the screen if you're on YouTube. It'll be in the show notes if you are not. You should go support them there because, as far as I know, you're unemployed right now, aren't you?
Yes, I've been laid off, and that's part of what has been leading me toward self-employment options as well, because I think my next job I'd like to be more in control of, and I'd also like to maybe even get away from trading my time for money unless it's more on my terms. So yes, I'm currently looking for the next opportunity, and my Patreon supporters I value greatly. Just the $1 a month is like, I can't believe people are willing to support me. Like, I don't feel I'm at a level where I should be expecting anything from anyone. And I'm just happy enough to see a positive comment, but I appreciate every Patreon supporter.
Yeah, it's people think it's just $1. It doesn't matter. You can't even buy a cup of coffee for $1 anymore. But it's I'll tell you, it's the meaning behind that dollar. That's the unbelievable part to me.
Yeah, I remember when I got my very first Patreon supporter after I basically set up the account and didn't expect anything to happen. And then I got an email alert on my phone. Congratulations, you have a new Patreon supporter. And I'm like, wow, it felt like I just got my first job after graduating or something. It's like overwhelming, like somebody is willing to support me.
Yeah, it's incredible. So I want to take some time to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat with me for about an hour and a half or so.
Oh, thank you. The pleasure was all mine, and I've been looking forward. We've been trying to schedule some time between both of our schedules, and I'm glad we finally had the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm really glad I was able to get you on because, again, I'm in this position where I don't feel like anybody should be willing to come onto the podcast. So it's good to see that quite a few people have stepped up and have wanted to, whether it be to help out or because they think it's interesting. But yeah, I really appreciate your time.
Oh, yeah. As an attendee now, I can definitely say it's an honor to be interviewed and to be able to share experiences. And it's just, again, another step in the available options for people looking for information. You know, some people may be interested in learning more about the creators or the process they've gone through instead of just seeing their exact projects they put out. And so I'm sure there's lots of value for anyone who tunes in, and everyone should tune in.
And to everyone tuning in, I want to thank you guys for listening. I want you to go over to Gadget Reboot's YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button. It's just a small gesture, but it means a whole lot. And if one of you can go the extra mile, head over to his Patreon page and throw a buck into the tip jar. But I want to thank you guys all for listening, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.